There comes a time when civil disobedience and breaking the laws of men are necessary because they conflict with the laws of God. The God of the Bible makes an exclusive claim over your life. He commands us that only He is to be worshipped. We must not sin. And so when the law of man asks us to do something that is sinful, we disobey because we must obey God rather than men. There's several examples of this throughout the Scripture. Remember when Rahab hid the spies in the land of Jericho? Shiphrah and Puah lied to Pharaoh so that they would not have to kill the Hebrew baby boys. Esther entered into the king's court even though she did not have permission so she could save lives. Peter and John preached Jesus as Lord even though the Jews told them not to. They said we must obey God rather than men. And when the laws of men contradict the law of God, we disobey the laws of men. But let me also say this. We must be so careful. In our hearts, in my heart, is a rebellious spirit that does not like to submit to anyone. Throughout history, we've seen great damage done by those who use God as an excuse not to obey the government when they should have. Notice here, Daniel is not protesting against slavery. He's not protesting that his name was changed to honor a pagan deity. He's not protesting that he had to learn a foreign language. He's not protesting that in the land he had to learn about pagan gods. He's not protesting that he works for an oppressive empire. I think about this. Remember when Jesus told his followers to pay taxes? Do you realize those taxes funded the Roman soldiers who put Jesus on a cross and would persecute the early church? I like what John Piper said about submission to the government. He says this, "Don't get your back up so easily, because being wronged by a government sends nobody to hell. But being rebellious and angry and bitter and spiteful does send people to hell. And so it is a much greater evil for you to be rebellious than of the government to mistreat you. Much greater evil for you, that is." Now, I don't know why he spoke like Yoda in the last sentence. Maybe because it's so wise. I think it's a very wise statement. Being wronged by the government sends nobody to hell, but being rebellious, anger, bitter, and spiteful does. I know many of us have probably wondered this question. I've wondered it myself. Should the church stand up against coronavirus regulations that the government has put out? I know some churches have. I appreciate their boldness. I appreciate their love for the gospel. But respectfully, I think they're wrong. Listen, the United States idolizes, and worships sports. And if they've canceled football seasons and limited attendance at NBA and MLB games, we're not being discriminated against. If they had full attendance at the baseball games and basketball games but restrictions on the church, then I would be very concerned. But if the government shuts down a multi-billion-dollar industry that people love, they're not discriminating against us. Now, I know we can look at, what about this case and this case? I understand that. And we can debate the seriousness of the virus, too. That's fine. This is America. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. However, there are many people who have gotten sick and died. I've had 2 friends with family members on ventilators. I've had a former student who I was a youth pastor of get coronavirus and spread it to her entire family. And while I don't ever think it'll get too serious in Jaga County because we're spread out and we have accessibility to health care, as Christians, we need to have this question dominate our mind. Am I being asked to disobey the law of my God with this law of men? And the answer is we're not. We're being asked to meet differently for health concerns. As a Christian, when we care for the least of these, according to Matthew 25, we actually care for Jesus Christ himself. And so I'm concerned about the person with poor health and low income that is working 2 jobs in the fast food industry and in the retail industry in order to make it by. You know, for many of us, for me, if I get sick, I'm going to take vacation time, I have health insurance, I'll probably be okay. But if that person gets coronavirus, and they have all these poor health habits, and they don't have good health insurance, they could die. And even if they don't die, they can't afford to take 2 weeks off of work. If they do, they're going to miss rent, and then what happens to them? And at the same time, while I say that, I'm also concerned about small businesses. Listen, people working their whole lives to build something up only to suffer during this time. When people say economy and money, those aren't just abstract terms to me. That's people's livelihoods. That's people's dreams. That's their well-being. And our public officials and healthcare workers have an absolute mess to figure out right now. It's an absolute mess. I don't want to be in their shoes. But as a Christian, I don't want to be part of the problem either, because I represent Jesus to the world. And here's the question that's dominating my mind. If I'm a picture of Jesus to the world, I want government officials to know what it's like to have Jesus as a citizen. Ask yourself, are you acting like Jesus would as a citizen of this country? Church, I want to be like Jesus. I want to be like Daniel in verse 4, where they couldn't find anything about me that was damaging evidence. I was trustworthy. I was guilty of no negligence or corruption. Church, we're not being asked to meet differently because people hate Jesus. You might say, but Kyle, some of our politicians do hate Jesus. Well, of course they do, right? Of course people out there hate Jesus. Jesus just said that in Matthew 10, that you'll be hated by all for my name's sake. Of course people want to eliminate Christianity and Jesus from the public square. You know, if you want to know my personal convictions about all of this, I actually see this whole event leading to a more united global government with regulations in setting up a precursor to the end time. That's my own personal conviction. But you know what? I'm not scared. I'm not anxious. I heard Chip Ingram say this last week, and it was so good. He said this. He says, we're not trying to win a culture war. We're trying to win people's hearts. Church, have we totally lost our mission? Our job is not to make the kingdom, but to preach about the coming kingdom. What if Christians had the same energy for politicians as they did for Jesus? What if Christians put signs in their lawns for Jesus? What if they gave money for Jesus? What if they posted for Jesus online and they told their friends, hey, you really ought to put your trust in Jesus. He's the one who can change the world. The mission, church, is to make disciples. That is the mission of the Bible. And for me, I want my witness to be consistent like Daniel's.